Would you share your lottery winnings? Be honest. You're at a turning point in your life. For years, you've lived in poverty, working as a waiter, and you and your colleagues made a pact. If one of us wins the lottery, we'll split the money. And that day has come. You are the winner. Now, before we move on to the video, I'm waiting for your answer in the comments. Are you willing to share the money with them? The Waffle House in Grand Bay, Alabama was a modest American diner located by the roadside. Its regulars, mostly retirees, had made it their second home. On March 6, 1999, it was once again filled with hungry, unpretentious customers. Edward Sardaki, a truck driver and one of the diner's regulars, settled into his usual booth, waiting for his waitress. He was alone today. His waitress was Tonda Dickerson, a single mother in her late 20s, working 5 shifts a week, who had left her abusive husband a couple of years prior. When Edward finished his meal, as per American tradition, he had to tip his waitress. Edward had a peculiar habit. Sometimes, instead of cash, he would give lottery tickets he'd bought from Florida as a tip to the waitresses. Normally, these were worthless dollar bills, holding a 1,000,000-to-1 chance of winning the jackpot. But Edward had been doing this for years, and for years, those tickets had never won anything. On that day, March 6, 1999, Edward handed out 5 envelopes to 5 different waitresses after his meal. This had become such a routine that the waitresses had even reached an understanding. If one of them ever won the lottery, they would share the winnings. It was merely locker room talk, as it were. They'd even made a semi-serious agreement with Edward. If one of the waitresses won the lottery, his only request would be a new pickup truck. Since no one took such a possibility seriously and his request was simple, everyone had agreed to this pickup truck deal. Ultimately, Edward had done what he always did, given his tip, paid his bill, and left. A one-day holiday followed, and 2 days later, on March 8th, the lottery results were announced. Like all her colleagues, Tonda opened the envelope containing the ticket that day and checked the results in the newspaper. And as you can imagine, bingo. The winning numbers announced in the lottery were identical to the numbers on Tonda's ticket. The struggling waitress, Tonda Dickerson, had won a full $10 million from the lottery thanks to that ticket. In the shock of the news, both Tonda and her colleagues had gone wild. This was an immense fortune that could instantly change Tonda's difficult life. Just a few days earlier, the young woman had been counting loose change from tips. Now she was the owner of a multi-million-dollar jackpot. But Tonda wasn't the only one overjoyed. As I mentioned, 4 of her waitress friends and the driver Edward were also part of the agreement. According to their unwritten pact, Tonda would share the winnings with them and Edward would get a new pickup truck. But money blinds. That $1 million was a sum large enough to lead a humble waitress astray, and the path taken was not a pleasant one. Tonda intended to keep the entire sum for herself instead of sharing the winnings as they had discussed. But there were 5 pairs of eyes, like orphans claiming their due upon her. According to her, the ticket with the winning numbers was in Tonda's hands, and this officially meant she was the sole winner of the grand prize. Now her dreams could come true. She could escape working in restaurant corners for life and secure a good future for her child. The only thing she had to do was resign from her job, forget the promise she had made to her friends, and leave that diner and her miserable old life behind without looking back. And that's what she did. Amidst frozen cursing glares, Tonda walked away. However, it wouldn't be easy for her to live her life without sharing such a large sum of money. Tonda's family also rallied around her as soon as they heard the news. Her father tried to guide his daughter in wisely managing this unexpected fortune, and Tonda was indeed looking for someone to support her. The very next day, her father called one of the Florida lottery attorneys to ask what they should do. The attorney's advice was clear. Do not sign the ticket immediately. Open a single legal entity, a company, to collect the prize on behalf of the family. Following this, Tonda's father promptly established a company. The money won from the Florida lottery would be claimed through this company and distributed among the family. Of course, the answer to why she wasn't directly collecting the money herself was taxes. Since companies have certain tax advantages compared to individuals, Tonda and her family intended to transfer this money to their accounts with the fewest deductions. Then Tonda allocated 49% of the company's shares to herself, distributing the remaining 51% among her parents and siblings. They believed this way they would protect the prize and share it as a family. Tonda also chose to receive the prize as annual payments instead of a lump sum. This meant she planned to receive $375,000 each year for the next 30 years. which would allow her to obtain a higher total amount due to the lottery's interest policy and avoid squandering the money all at once. Thus, everything seemed like a dream for Tonda and her family. Or so it appeared at first glance. For while Tonda thought she had been blessed with good fortune, she was unaware that a nightmare was descending upon her. As expected, the other Waffle House employees did not simply accept Tonda's reneging on their agreements and took the matter to court. They argued that the prize was jointly won from the very beginning and that a portion of it belonged to them according to their agreement. Tonda's lawyer would describe this emerging situation by saying, "Bedbugs are crawling out of every corner," emphasizing how people change in the face of money. Of course, who was changing was another matter. However, as soon as the lawsuit was filed, an Alabama court issued an order stopping the payment of the prize. This meant Tonda's monthly payments to her company were cut off. Shortly thereafter, the open lawsuit concluded. Curiously, a local court jury found Tonda's colleagues to be in the right, ruling that there had been a prior promise of sharing and that a large portion of the prize should be given to the other waitresses. Yes, it was like a joke, but the court had made such a decision even though there was no document, let alone a witness other than themselves, about the prize being shared. Consequently, Tonda, whose world had virtually collapsed, faced the danger of losing 80% of her $10 million with this decision. In the early stages of the lawsuit, her friends had offered Tonda a settlement, allowing her to keep $3 million, but Tonda had refused the offer. She believed the ticket she won was rightfully hers and was determined to continue the legal battle. Indeed, she did not give up and appealed the decision. She wasn't going to wait silently. In February 2000, the Alabama Supreme Court reviewed the case again and made an important principal decision. Even if the aforementioned verbal agreement existed, informal agreements concerning gambling and lotteries were not enforceable under Alabama state law. In other words, the High Court overturned the First Court's decision, ruling in Tonda's favor. Thus, Tonda breathed a sigh of relief, not having to pay a single penny to her colleagues. However, this was only the first act of the storm. If you recall, there was someone else among those to whom a promise was made besides Tonda's colleagues. Edward Shar, the regular customer who had given Tonda the lucky ticket as a tip, also wanted his share. Edward hadn't actually demanded any money from Tonda in exchange for the ticket. After all, it was a tip. However, the magnitude of the prize stirred things up, and it seemed Edward also decided to try his luck. His claim was that Tonda had promised to buy him a new pickup truck if she won. But Tonda also denied this claim. After all, buying a pickup truck for the man who gave her the ticket, even with 1% of her winnings, wouldn't deplete her fortune. But apparently, that's how money corrupts people. By 2002, Edward had also resorted to legal action. Fortunately, this second lawsuit was resolved more quickly than the first. The local court judge in Mobile County ruled that there was no written agreement and that such a claim was legally invalid, dismissing that lawsuit as well. The court clearly established that ownership of the ticket had passed to Tonda from the beginning, and the man could no longer claim rights over it. As can be seen, Tonda's first few years after winning the lottery were filled with legal battles. However, apart from these, Tonda had actually intended to share the prize with her family. As I said, she had even established a company for this purpose. But such a large sum of money also triggered disputes among family members. Some relatives or her siblings expected a larger share, while others disagreed with Tonda's decisions. According to media reports, some of Tonda's relatives had also attempted to sue her, but since this was based on voluntariness, they couldn't even file a lawsuit. In other words, everyone was trying to grab a slice of the pie, and by everyone, I truly mean everyone wanted a slice. While Edward's pickup truck lawsuit was still fresh, Tonda found herself under a personal threat. In March 2002, her abusive ex-husband, Stacy Martin, resurfaced and, so to speak, asked, "Is there for them, but not for us?" Despite divorcing Tonda in 1997, Stacy Martin began to harbor dark plans when he heard in the newspapers that his ex-wife had won the lottery. One night, as Tonda was driving home in her pickup truck, her ex-husband followed her vehicle. Then he intentionally crashed into Tonda's truck, forcing her off the road. Before she could even understand what was happening, Martin attacked, taking control of the young woman at gunpoint and threatening her with death, leading her from a wooded road to an isolated shore. The intent was clear. The man was pointing a gun at her and demanding money from Tonda. But at that very moment, the woman's cell phone began to ring. Tonda, with a clever move, told him that if she didn't answer the phone, people would worry and that answering it would be in his best interest. In a moment of distraction, Stacy allowed Tonda to answer the phone. As Tonda slowly reached for her purse as if to take out her phone, she pulled out a pistol she had hidden in her bag and shot Martin in the chest. According to Tonda's statement, the man was still shouting about money as he lay on the ground, but Tonda's concern was not to become a murderer. Fortunately, her wits served her well, and she managed to convince her injured ex-husband to get into the car and rushed him to the nearest hospital. The man was then treated, their statements were taken, and over time, Tonda was found innocent, acting in self-defense. But more interestingly, despite being targeted for murder by her ex-husband, Stacy Martin's actions were recorded as a domestic violence case. Thus, he either received no punishment or a very minor sentence with probation, effectively getting away with it. Therefore, what Tonda experienced was a complete trauma. The protagonist began to curse the day she won the lottery, but she started to retreat from interviews and the like, wishing for peace, saying, "Surely this is all I have to endure." By the mid-2000s, the storms surrounding the grand prize and thus Tonda seemed to be subsiding. However, one last blow was yet to come. This time, Tonda wasn't facing greedy friends or her money-hungry ex-husband. As she tried to enjoy the ill-gotten gains, she now faced the state itself. A few years after the lottery win and the subsequent events, the United States Internal Revenue Service sent Tonda a notification. According to the IRS, the transactions Tonda had made through the company she established to share her winnings with her family and pay less tax had resulted in a significant tax debt. Tonda had transferred 51% of the company's shares to her parents and siblings. As I said, tax inspectors argued that this was technically a gift made to the family. Thus, according to U.S. tax laws, gifts or donations above a certain amount are subject to a gift tax. But Tonda had not paid anything until then, apart from the tax deducted from the lottery winnings. Therefore, the IRS demanded approximately $770 in taxes for the prize share Tonda had transferred to her family. For the young woman, this news was an absolute lightning bolt. After all she had been through, she now had to fight her government. However, she did not give up on this tax issue either and appealed to the courts again. She challenged the IRS's demand, arguing that there had been a long-standing agreement within her family. If one of us wins the lottery, we'll split it among us, and therefore, the transfer of shares should not truly be considered a gift. This tax case would also drag on for years. But with the passing years, finally, in 2012, the tax court rendered its decision. The court rejected Tonda's defense of an intra-family agreement precisely because it was a verbal agreement, as you recall. The agreement with her waitress friends was also verbal, and a considerable tax payment was levied on Tonda. Thus, with all the money spent on lawyers, therapy bills, and the tax amount, Tonda was on the verge of losing her mind. She had no choice but to agree to pay and somehow close this matter. Her colleagues, customer, relatives, ex-husband, even the tax office had tried to capitalize on her, and the state always wins. But thankfully, it was finally over. According to media reports, after all these ordeals, Tonda was left with only about $1 million from her $10 million prize, excluding taxes. Of course, this amount was still a large sum for many people. However, considering what Tonda went through, the money won came with heavy burdens, light in monetary value, but heavy in price. Instead of the benefits of being rich, the young woman had alienated herself from everyone through a series of events that almost cost her life. While there are rumors about her current life, suggesting she became a casino dealer or started a business, I believe she will continue to feel the wear and tear of those years throughout her life. Perhaps we can say easy come, easy go, but the psychological aftermath left by this money was, in my opinion, one of the undeniable realities. So, what do you think she should have done? Should she have simply shared the money without fuss, bought the man his truck, and lived happily ever after? Or would something still have happened to her even if she had done that? Or what would you have done if you were in her shoes? See you in the comments. That's all for me this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please remember that I do all the work on this channel alone, and I can only do it with your likes and comments. And as always, stay well until the next video.